So good evening, and thank you for joining us again on our weekly conversations with FLON and very specific experts on the topic that we're dealing with. Last week, we spoke to a number of mental health experts as well as medical doctors on what to do around COVID. This week, we're speaking to the mental health issues, and we realize mental health is both psychological, it's got a lot to do with psychiatry, but it's also got a lot to do with our spiritual feelings and our religious beliefs. And because of that, we've got Dr. Andre September, who leads a congregation of over 3,000 people and who really has had first-hand experience of the trauma and mental health consequences of COVID. So welcome, Dr. September.
Thank you very much.
We've got Ute Sinkala, who's a clinical psychologist. She has her own practice, who does amazing work, especially with young people. Welcome, Ute.
Thank you.
Then I've got Dr. Fourie van der Berg. He's already laughing as I'm introducing him. He's from the ERA's Dutch Reformed Church, also a congregation of over 3,000 people. Welcome, Fourie.
Thank you, Monica.
Then we've got Dr. Njaba, who is a psychiatrist at the Windhoek Mental Hospital. Welcome, Dr. Njaba.
Thank you.
And then we've got Mani Kanji, who's a senior social worker in the Ministry of Health, but she's also the deputy lead of the mental health pillar of the COVID response. So welcome, Ms. Kanji.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, and we hope to have an engaging conversation. Many of you have sent us your questions on our Facebook and our Twitter accounts, and many of your questions are with the relevant experts, and they will be answered. There are also people watching our platforms at the moment for more questions. So if any of the panelists says something that you feel is very, very important, or that you want to ask a question on, please don't hesitate to go to our Facebook platform. NBC's Facebook platform is also streaming this, and ask the question, and we'll ask one of the panelists to answer. So we'll go straight into the discussion, starting with Dr. September, and each panelist will just do a quick overview of their observations and the mental health, the bereavement, the grieving process that you're seeing in our communities at the moment.
No, thank you very much, and good afternoon all. As ministers and priests and pastors, we deal with death almost on a daily basis. And with death, the grief that comes with it, the anxiety, but also all the other mental challenges that society face. But in a place like Windhoek, where you have such a large concentration of people, it's almost as if the challenges are always amplified. But we've never witnessed what we've experienced over the last 15 to 20 days. And that also gives us some new perspectives on the challenges that we face and how to deal with them. It's no understatement any longer when we say that we are faced with almost one of the most difficult times in the history of our country. We need to understand this so that we can help one another deal with these challenges. So I'm very happy to be part of this panel and to offer whatever it is that I can do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ute?
I think from my perspective, what I have been experiencing, what I realized is that even recently you have patients who end up being rushed to hospital because they can't breathe, and people who are having symptoms of what is expected to be COVID, but then it turns out to be a panic attack or anxiety, and then these people are going to hospitals, and then they are being fearful. And even with grief, even with COVID and the pandemic, there's so much anxiety and fear in the air, and it's contagious, and social media is spreading all of these things. And with that sense of anxiety and the stress hormones, we are constantly under stress now. And my concern is on a psychological level, what are we going to be left with afterwards? Because parents are afraid. They are locking themselves in the house with the children. They don't live. What's going to happen with those children afterwards? with the increased levels of stress that we are all experiencing, it impacts on our normal health and other conditions. And even if you do are tested positive for COVID, while you are extremely stressed, your symptoms and all of that, and anxiety symptoms mixed with COVID symptoms, it's not good. So we need to get the right information. We need to teach people how to live with COVID amongst this death. You know, we need to help the nation to continue living.
Thanks, Uta. Furi?
I think it is definitely the worst of times that we've experienced in the history, but it's also the best of times, because in times like this, then there arises opportunities to overcome past mistakes, past faults that we've made, and also present ones, to actually change for the future. I think it's a time of unification now. It's a time where people should leave the past behind and stop accusing and blaming and whatever, because everybody's anxious, is hysterical, we are losing our rational minds, and it's throughout the society. And I think it's a time where we can really take hands for the first time. COVID is a bad thing, but the best that we can is to use it in our favor, and that is to unify. Firstly, secondly, is that we must make an aggressive stop against misinformation and false stuff outside there, where that really influences people so negatively and makes them anxious. So we need to address science, facts, the truth out of the Word of God, because what is very disturbing for me is that people are using the Bible to actually cause havoc. And I think as an ambassador of God, our role is to bring peace and hope, not to bring fear and judgment and accusations. And that is currently what's happening. And I think I'm more on that line, that I want to really address that, so that we can move into the future and looking back sometime and say, COVID was terrible. We lost so many people. We weren't prepared for it, but it unified us, and it made us one nation moving forward.
That's a great perspective.
Yeah.
Dr. Njaba?
Okay, on my perspective is that COVID and mental health go hand in hand, and I think it's a try time, since mental health has been ignored for too long, that people don't want to be associated with mental health, whether mental health services or the people who are suffering from mental illnesses. I can see that there will be sequelae of COVID afterwards for the survivors. Those that have suffered from COVID, those that have lost their loved ones from COVID, especially the children, looking at them losing both parents at the same time. It is not mourning as usual, it's not grief as usual, because in a usual normal life, losing, dying, at least one parent may go, few years pass by, then the other one follow, because that is nature, that we all have to die. But with COVID, it is happening so quickly, rapidly, that the people left behind, they are panicking, because there are many things that are happening. These ones that they are dying, they are the ones who are providers. They are the ones who take care of them. They are the ones who love them most. And the most worrisome is that when somebody wants to go to the hospital because they are feeling symptoms of COVID, me being a doctor and being a psychiatrist, family member, people, they know you, they will call you first. They will tell you that I have got a medical aid and I need to go to the hospital. I have tried it. I can testify on it. I have called, I have a relative, I called almost 3 of our private hospitals. They say there are no bed. So then at the end of the day, I have to advise that they only have to go to Katutura Hospital, which people, when they are having only physical illness apart from the COVID, they don't see the need for them to go to Katutura. But Katutura now become the heaven. So I think it's also a try time for our government to see to it that our state hospitals are made to a standard where we can really take care of our people when they are ill. The other private, yes, they are there, but the capacity, it is small, and now our doctors are overwhelmed. They are contracting COVID. They are stressed. And even department, doctors are being pulled out to go and assist with COVID. So it is really a trial time, and we need to work together so that we overcome, and God will really see us through.
Excellent. I was surprised last week, Dr. Njaba, we had 2 psychiatrists on the panel, and they made a comment that there's only 10 psychiatrists in this whole country. Would that be your estimation?
Of which only 4 in the States.
Yeah.
The rest 6, I think, is in private. So 3 in Windhoek and 1 in Oshakati. And now with all this that is happening, it is really, there is a need for us. And in fact, we also appealing that people should go for training, especially in mental health. But then there is a problem because the society is more negative about mental health. They start stigmatizing the patients, the health providers. They always feel that those who are working with mental ill people, maybe they are also mental unwell. So that become really a problem.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's a shocking number for me, that there's, in a country with a mental health burden as heavy as ours, that goes back to our past, to only have 10 psychiatrists really shows that we need to invest more in the mental health space. But before we wrap up this discussion, maybe if Mrs. Kanji, if you could just take us through a few of your perspectives as a senior social worker for government.
Thank you very much. My observation is more on our cultures. Our different cultures that we are having is being challenged. The way that we used to do things, the way we used to even go about mourning, which is also was the way how people could grieve. Now COVID is challenging us to change our way how we used to do things. And it's why it's also difficult for our communities to cope even with regulations, what we are setting for COVID. Because you know, even the way we were mourning as families is being disrupted. The number of days you need to try and conform to that, not only because you need to bury as soon as possible, but also to prevent further infections. So our people are being exposed to our culture to become now evolving and to change. And I'm just hoping also there are certain things in our cultures that we don't need to go back to. So COVID is also presenting that opportunity for us to be able to look at the way we used to do things. Because we might not also know when do we also maybe experience another pandemic. So we need to be able to go back and assess the way we used to live, looking at our way of living, our structures, even our educational system, that are we really providing enough even for our children in our educational system? Because when you look at the public sector, with even the first lockdowns, people who were crying out more is the public schools, not the private schools. So maybe COVID is also an opportunity for us to really to assess our way of living in different sectors. But also my own observation is also to our healthcare workers. Really, for me, I take my hat off for the healthcare workers for what they are going through, because they are all also they are experiencing this in their own family, the death. They are also being infected, but they need to come back and also provide to others. So, and it's also maybe time to also look at how do we intensify, how do we give those incentives to our healthcare workers who are also having sleepless nights, and also to wait, what am I going to see after I have knocked out the doctors, the nurses, the social workers who are working in those respiratory units. You might come the next morning and you don't find the person that you were caring for, that you were hoping for. So you are experiencing that as a service provider, but also as your own families are going through that. But you need to stand up and go to work and provide, because we cannot all be on lockdown. Even if lockdowns are called, but the healthcare workers have to be there on the forefront and provide these services. So I think maybe COVID is also providing us an opportunity to look at how do we provide services in all the different structures, whether it's education, whether it's health, well, even our own economy will be affected. And how are we going to go back and also provide the aftermath of COVID will be there with us,
Yes.
and we need to provide also more for these people.
Yes. So it's interesting how all of your statements really intertwined with acknowledging the deep trauma, especially in the last 15 days, that has been in our societies, how it's an opportunity to rebuild spiritually, psychologically, including the trauma that we've been carrying even before COVID that we've never processed, but also an opportunity to re-examine our family structures, our community structures, our church structures, and build a more equal society where public health, quality public health is accessible, quality public education is accessible, where mental health is destigmatized. And I think these are the conversations we were supposed to be having before COVID, and we've been having before COVID. And I think what COVID has forced us to do is to realize the things that really have to be fixed, because they collapsed very quickly once COVID hit us. So thank you for your insights, and my role here is going to be transferred to Blanche Godoses from the NBC, who will now be taking the questions that have been asked on our platforms, and some questions that will be going through to our platforms that will be communicated to Blanche, and she'll be addressing them to our panelists.
Thank you so much, Madam First Lady. Well, the first question I would love to direct to Reverend September, and that's now this person saying, I'm overwhelmed. How do we accept that we are living in this pandemic? And for the Reverend to be assisted by Mrs. Singhala and Dr. Anjaba also, just on that specific question.
Thank you very much. It's a very, very appropriate question. I want to start by maybe reflecting on mourning, because even from the panel's initial responses or thoughts, I could sense that the challenge of mourning creates a lot of pain and uncertainty about the time in which we find ourselves. Now, just speaking from a Christian perspective, when Peter reminds us that we are a royal priesthood, then what Peter in fact says is that all of us, if you are a believer, you are a priest. And priests are meant to mediate God's presence, which means that wherever you find yourself, you affirm that God is present. Now, that is what our faith almost saddles us with. Because when people of faith express their love and they express their care, what they in effect do is that they affirm that God is present. In this time, we cannot express our love and our faith in the old traditional ways that we've become used to. So now we start to question whether we are doing the right thing. We start to question whether God is truly present then. But we have had challenges throughout history. And in fact, when one just think about, and I'll be brief, how the church was created out of families, small families. So they were very small units, which means that they could easily care for one another. And out of that developed a ministry of presence. You should always be present when someone goes through difficult times or so. In times of adversity like now, we learn that perhaps that presence is manifested through prayer. We can pray for one another, having the assurance that God is still present, whether we are physically present or not. God is still present, even in the midst of all of this.
And from a mental point of view, Mrs. Singala.
I would say that, you know, like if we have to understand the feeling of being overwhelmed. Being overwhelmed basically comes from feeling like you have too much to do. You are extremely taxed. You are faced with adversity. You are faced with many challenges that you do not know how to handle, and you think you are not capable of handling it. So what I would say is you need to understand the power of our brains. Human beings, the one thing that we can do very well is adapt. And in order for you to understand your own power and your own adaptability, you need to look at these challenges and adversities as in, first of all, understand what stress and anxiety is, what it does to your body. Make an effort to control the stress and the anxiety. Calm down, breathe, that's very important. Exercise, start with those things. Take care of yourself, self-care. Next thing you need to do in order to deal with feelings of overwhelm is look at what the situation is. Little things, structure your day. If you are scared, structure your day. Tell yourself, I need to wake up, I need to open the curtains, I need to make my bed, I need to shower, I need to do this and that. When you're breathing, exercising, structuring your day, your brain and body already feels calm and then centered. Then you'll be able to face any kind of being overwhelmed. Another thing that I will say that also ties in with the cultural aspect and us as human beings being able to adapt. I remember myself and my husband telling my family and my parents we want to be cremated when we pass away. And they said, no, you can't do that, this is, you know. And guess what happened? I lost my father to COVID. And what did we have to do? We cremated him and we had the most beautiful service for him. And the way has been paved. My mom has already reserved a space for herself. And it felt amazing. And we adapt. And this can be done. So what you need to remember is whether you lose one parent, you lose two parents, you lose a child, all of these experiences are different. But if you have the resolve to understand that my life, I still live, you honor your loved ones by continuing living. And adversity, challenges, like the pastor said, human beings have faced many of these. And we've survived. And we will survive, definitely. And the pain that you feel right now, it is okay. It's a normal, natural process to be scared and to hurt. Feel it, allow yourself to feel it, and you will survive.
Pastor van den Berg, you earlier spoke about just information being out there, so I'll direct this question to you. Every day is a new story of loss and tragedy. How does one deal with stress, fear associated with in this climate? Just briefly, a response on that.
I just want to firstly make a remark before I answer the question, which I think for me it's very important that we speak about that and agree about that. We are experiencing the third wave now, and we weren't prepared for it. Yes. The fourth wave is coming, and it's going to be more devastating. And I don't want to be a doom prophet. I want to be a prophet of hope, but we must use our brains. And we must do everything now possible to prepare for that fourth wave so that we don't find ourselves with the pants on our knees again. So that's very important for me, is that we must really work hard now together. That's why I said the luxury of our differences and our backgrounds and the past and the blaming and accusing and who's with is gone. It's now time to unify, to stand together. We must do damage control now, and that's regarding your question, because systems aren't in place. Our structures can't handle the overwhelming, prolonged grief disorder, because that's what we are experiencing now. I mean, they've written about this in the 90s, Kubler-Ross, PGD, prolonged grief disorder, and now we're experiencing it. Because of restrictions, we are isolated and we can't see each other. So that loneliness with our minds, the ability that God gave us to think with our brains, can be destructive now, because your brain, your capacity to think, can be your biggest enemy now, with all these voices in your head, and there's nobody that you can talk to because you are isolated, you are alone. That's the first thing. We need connection. We need discussion. And technology, as bad as it can be for teenagers and people sitting on social media, and I want to reflect to that as well, as one of the worst things that is can be to us, but we can use technology wise. We can use technology in our church and churches around the country. We've set up many useful forms of technology. Grieving lines, helping people, helping them to die, being alone at their home and have this anxious attacks. And if you can just have a therapist or a counselor that can just talk you through how to die well, because you've lived a well life, but now you can't die because there's nobody there. People are living with enormous amounts of guilt that they did not do enough. I wasn't there. I couldn't hold her hand. I couldn't say goodbye. We need to help people to get rid of their guilt, because it's not a time that we need to feel guilty now. We believe in the gospel of forgiveness. And it's not our fault that we can't be there. But we need to have structures in churches and through mental health organizations combined, that we know that we are covering. If the fourth wave comes, we will be geared to do it. Regarding social media, just as an end, I think we need a lot of discernment. I specifically come out telling people, don't go on Facebook, because it just, all those deaths that you see, it just overwhelms you. It just makes you fearful. And we need to keep distances with that. Certain times of the day for a small amount, but to sit on that thing because you have time at home alone, and you read through all that stuff, and then all the experts are there. The experts of doctors, normal people being doctors, being psychiatrists, normal people, farmers, become pastors now, overnight, experts. And I was sitting in a plane, and I said to the guy, I think I can fly this plane. And he said, well, did you have any qualification? I said, no, but I know aircrafts. They wouldn't allow me. But now we allow the farmer and the teacher and the retired person to become the expert pastor, you know, telling you about the 666 and the mark of the animal in the vaccine. And you have psychiatrists all of a sudden, and you have medical doctors telling you that your DNA can change through the vaccine. And we need to stop this. We need to really, really stop this. And I think we must send out this message. That's what I'm saying. We need to collaborate so that we can help our people not to fall victim to these things. Because the pandemic itself is bad, but we can make it worse. With what we are doing and how we are thinking about it and saying about it.
Blanche, before you go on, last week and the week before, Dr. Brewer was on our platforms talking about the fourth wave. And there was a bit of a reaction there about how do these Illuminati people know that there's a fourth wave coming? Surely they're the ones triggering it. And Fourí's answer is there. We must use our brains. You can forecast. So there's been we're in the third wave. They're following a pattern. So if we need to follow that pattern, extrapolate the days, you can calculate when the fourth wave is going to hit us. The reality is, if we're not going to change our behavior, if we're not going to be united, if we're not going to vaccinate, there is going to be a fourth wave. And if we look back at the different waves, except the second wave in this country, the next wave is mostly worse than the wave behind it. So if this one is bad, we are potentially looking at a worse fourth wave with potentially new variants of the virus that act differently. So I just wanted to clarify that, because I do notice there's always a question, how do you know? There are epidemiologists. I can never pronounce that word, so forgive me.
Dermatologist.
Okay, Dr. September said it. I don't know how to say it. There are people who forecast these things and look at the behavior of a virus.
And I think it was also affirmed in yesterday's COVID update by the head of state and the health minister. The next question is to Dr. Njaba and Mrs. Kanji, dealing with children who may have lost a parent, grandparent, or guardians as a result of COVID-19, specifically asking, how can we support and reduce the anxiety of children who have to deal with unpredictable life events, such as what you earlier spoke about, disruption of school, witnessing financial anxiety of parents, and coping in a world that seems to be in a turmoil? Mrs. Ganji, you can start.
Thank you. I think Dr. Uri was talking about this is the time for us to reconnect. This is a time, there are certain things in our culture that are so good. If we can go back how our grandparents, our mothers used to live, even in a community, that interconnection of knowing what a neighbor's child is doing, what a neighbor's child is eating, those are the things that we need to think of, because government alone, what we are going to sit with, won't be able to cope without us coming on board and say, how can I lend a hand? How can I help my neighbor's child? The other day I lost a family member, and I was talking to a friend and say, we cannot go to her funeral. The husband passed on, so we cannot go there, but we should think, what can we do? There's so much that we can do. There are children left behind. How do we go out there and help these children to survive after the death of their parents? Whether we have government grants and that alone won't help. The child needs somebody to talk to. Money alone won't help a child. We need to be able to go back and establish and reconnect again in our community. Go back to the way our parents used to live. Even when we were schooling, you were not only afraid of your parents when you are working there on the street. You know very well if you do anything wrong, any parent can reprimand you. Any parent will ask you, why did you not go to school? It's school time. Why are you on the street? So those are the things that we need to go back to and say that those children need somebody, they need counseling, they need support, because the bereavement services is, for me, so important. Although the social workers are working now with families to prepare them to bury their loved ones, for me, I feel the aftermath of this COVID is so important. We need to pull together resources and come up and say that we cannot now play a blaming game, as you have said, that what is government doing? You need to ask yourself, what are you doing? You have children living on your street, you have children in your community who lost one or two parents, or even any caregiver whom they have to stay with. So for me, I feel we need to be able to think already, start thinking that how do I, me, myself, help another person, help another child? Not only your children, but your neighbors. And be able there to be the support to provide, to refer to counseling services, to refer for other support groups. I was talking to my colleague there now, we need to link and say that how do we also extend our hands already to our social workers? They are out. People are being out. People then themselves are losing their families. But how do we come together and say, I'm here to avail myself? Today I have a conversation, a meeting with UNAM, who came on board and say, we are here as your colleagues. What can we do? And the social workers by profession say, our mortuary staff are there. They are seeing these bodies every day. They are working with this death every day. How can you be on support? And they came on board. So that's what we need to do now in our own way as an individual, rather not to blame, but to say, what can I offer? Because every help is so important.
Okay, what we need to do is that there are stages of grief and bereavement, and people grieve differently according to their ages. So if you see a child told about the parents that have passed on, maybe a child of 2 to 5 years, the reaction will be different. And the other one of 7 years to 11 years will also react differently. And the one of 17 to 18 years will also react differently. And these people will now present with some changes, behavior changes, especially in the young ones. They will start with behavior changes where they become irritable. Then they start having temper tantrums, and one will not understand why this child is behaving the way they are behaving. Then the other adult one, they will start now having also mood changes. They will become anxious, they become depressed, and they even start using substances as a coping mechanism. And they start isolating themselves, and they become antisocial. So with all this, they will then have a long standing problem. So what we need to do immediately if a death has happened, we need to involve either the social worker, the psychologist, the psychiatrist, the church leaders, the community leader, to see how they can help this person who has lost a family. First of all, now with the time of COVID, and now you have got somebody who the parents died of COVID, and also the family is affected. What is important is to show support. To show support in a way that perhaps we look also in the burial, the funeral undertakers. Maybe they should also look into to say, okay, now this person needs to be buried. But now the person who needs to deal with whether to buy a coffin, whether to go to the bank or to go to the work where this person was working, can't go because this person is also have tested positive. Maybe the family member or the community member or the church member, whoever is willing to assist the family, should then take it up with the burial services to say, can you please perhaps assist this family to make sure that you have provided a coffin for them to bury their loved one. Then the afterward payment can be done after everything has been assessed to say, okay, there's money that can pay. And I'm sure also our Ministry of Health and Social Services, in a case where the person cannot afford a coffin. I was just recently at the mortuary and I saw some simple coffin, what I think the ministry is providing. So this can be made available for the family to bury their loved one. Then specifically, I think the question was to say, how do we deal with grief, especially with the children? So they may not start immediately showing that because they are in denial. Then they are in disbelief. Then afterwards, then they will start now bargaining. Then they will start becoming depressed. Then the depression and now the grief, which can now be prolonged, and they become stressed. And when somebody becomes stressed, it means that their body immunity also goes wrong. They can develop inflammation. Then this inflammation can lead to diseases like cardiovascular and can also lead to other infection. So as a result, this person may also die, even if contracting other diseases, not necessarily COVID. So therefore, we really need to give a hand. We all need to come into and we do what we call a biopsychosocial support. If the grief child needs anything to treat a depression, then this person must be taken to the healthcare providers. If they need any psychotherapy, then they should be seen by the psychologist, social support by the social workers, and the spiritual support by our spiritual people, and the community must be there. As my colleagues say, we have to go back where we were a community that assists each other. Yeah.
Lord, can I, sorry,
yes,
just
please.
want to chip in. Just to add on to what Dr. Njaba is saying, I think as the people that provide support, what we need to remember is we are going to get tired, but the longevity, we must not give up and we must not lie down. And the only way we can do that is if we take care of ourselves.
Yep.
We need to remember to take care of ourselves. And taking care of yourself is not to take a holiday to Mauritius in 3 years' time, the only holiday that you've ever taken. It's to do the self-care every single day, to reset, to take care of yourself. That is very important. And we need to realize that, like the doctor mentioned before, we need to use technology not to sit and look at Facebook and WhatsApp forwards the whole time. But even psychosocial services now, psychological services, we have adapted. We offer trauma services now, specifically grief and trauma services we can do online. We can now offer services in groups, because there's no time to just offer one person a service right now, because we need to adapt, use the technology to offer services to groups. So if our children are not well, they are very good with technology. Get them in contact, have groups where they can have group counseling, group services where they can support each other. And sometimes the best way to get support is from a peer, from somebody who's also lost and is also going through the process, instead of from a professional. So you just need a facilitator who can do the group facilitation for the psychotherapy or counseling, bereavement.
And then I will direct this question to you, Mrs. Sinkala. How do I deal with guilt over the possibility that I may have infected a person who died?
Yeah. Now, guilt that is unfounded, that if you didn't do it intentionally, then that guilt is not healthy. So that's what you ask yourself. Did I do it intentionally? No. If you are acting responsibly, I always tell people we don't have time machines to go back in the past. But as human beings, we literally have some kind of GPS that we can try and navigate. Just because we all know we are going to die, but we don't know exactly when. That's already a sure fact, I am going to die. So I have a choice about what I'm doing right now. If I intentionally even infected somebody with HIV 2 weeks ago, and I feel bad about it, and I've made up, and I promise to not do it again going forward, then that guilt and that carrying that thing around is unnecessary. So you have to again engage your mind. Speak positively. Do what you can to not repeat that behavior. Be responsible. Yeah? That's the only thing you can do, because yes, you can unintentionally. COVID is the only time that just stepping out of your house to go and buy bread, you can bring home something potentially fatal and lethal for your mom, your daughter. You don't know. So in terms of COVID-19, if you start feeling excessive guilt and you think maybe I did it, then you need to speak to somebody, because right now nobody should feel guilty.
And the next question is straight to FLON. Are you not becoming numb of hearing about death and high hospitalization rates? The person also wants to, I know you've spoken about it before, but also wants to know your state of mind when you contracted COVID.
I think the numbness, and everybody sitting here has the same challenge. Every single police officer, every single nurse or doctor, every single lawyer who deals with criminal cases. When you deal with human trauma in any form, on a repeated basis, there is always that risk to protect your own sanity, where you do disassociate to an extent. Even people who deal with gender-based violence and sexual violence. So that risk is always there, and partly what I've done to myself is I don't allow myself to get numb. I do allow myself to feel the pain of every death. Because at this point, you're just like, oh, okay, your dad died, I'm sorry, condolences, and you move on to the next one. But you don't give a moment to feel it, because that will build up and it will catch you. So I let myself process the emotions as they happen. As to the emotions of when I contracted COVID and the emotions around that, it was very much what all the experts here have been talking about, of how you process your emotions is very important in how your recovery process will go. So I did get anxiety, and it's remained with me. There were nights I would wake up and it felt like adrenaline was pumping through my body. It felt like a heart problem, it felt like a cardiological problem, but it was actually just anxiety. It's lessened, but it's still there. And I speak about it openly because we must start speaking about these things openly. The days I'm not coping, I say to the people around me, I'm not coping today. Tomorrow I'll be strong, but today I'm not strong. And then I also was lucky, I've got a very calm husband. Many of you may know him. He looks like he's always angry, but he's actually the happiest guy. But he's a calm person. So it is helpful, because all of us have our strengths. I know who to call when I want to panic about something. I know who to call when I need to be calm. I'm lucky to have a calm person in the house. But we must reach out to those in our lives who we know are calm people, because they do influence our emotions. If I've got a friend who's sending me SMSs the whole time about, it said, "Jy gehoor, Auntie Vivi is ook dood," it's going to stress me. While I have COVID, now I'm seeing all these people dying. Of course I'm going to think I'm also going to die. So who I allowed into my space in that moment. And then there's something that Dr. Belinda Prouver said last week about when you're feeling powerless, which is how I felt. Do what's in your control. Get vaccinated. If you have the ability to get up and go exercise, go and exercise. If you have the ability to reach out to Ute and say, "Ute, I'm sorry about the passing of your dad," do it. Do whatever you have control over. So I've done that.
Say no.
And also say no. Have boundaries. Thank you.
Sure.
Establish boundaries. Because you can also burn yourself out trying to help everybody. Because financially, I'm exhausted. Emotionally, I'm exhausted. So there are people I can help. And there's other people I really have to have boundaries and say, "Look,
I can't.
my focus is on helping people with COVID. I can't help you with the repossession of your car. I can't help you with your child's school fees that aren't paid. I can't help you with your house repayments." So we must set boundaries. Thanks, Ute.
And don't, if you know that one of your aunts always sends the death messages in the family group,
Block her.
don't open anything she sends, but block her.
Or
yes.
just delete it in the WhatsApp
Yes.
before you open it.
Simple.
The next question I'll direct to the two pastors on family dynamics deteriorating due to conflicting ideas and information regarding treatment options. Now, how do we resolve family conflict during this period as to who will bear the financial cost for treatment and anxiety and so on? So, Reverend, you may start.
It's almost like any death. Once a death occurs within a family, as a pastor, you have the responsibility to identify with whom you speak, because there could be so many different voices within the family who wants to speak to you and who wants to influence you in the way that the burial should happen. And it's the same with sickness and treatment thereof. It's a tried and tested way of speaking to the family. Find a way of speaking to the family. If I've asked the family, just for the sake of speaking to them, that they should create a group. They didn't have a family group because they didn't think there was a need for them to communicate with one another. But they did so in order for me to speak directly to all of them. So I think the colleague was earlier speaking about how to adapt and how to innovate. And through that, simple techniques and tools, you try and mediate, you try and help direct the family, and so that they can come to an agreement. Because you cannot deal with sickness, you cannot deal with death when there's so much enmity within a family.
Pastor?
The Bible is a good book. It's a book of life. But the Bible doesn't have a lot of good stories about families. It actually starts with a family that are dysfunctional. In the first two borns ever, in Cain and Abel. Sibling rivalries will always be there in all families. Everybody tries to be the boss and tries to be important and tries to earn the blessings and whatever. And we need to go back to birthing order, because it plays a huge role in the Bible, and we've lost it. We've lost a lot of things. We've given up the right to live as normal citizens to the government, and we look at them to do things that we need to do. Just as an example, I was running and I was falling in a hole in the road, and the first thing that you can do is to blame the municipality. Yeah, we're paying fees and how that, and we just started to fix the holes. It's my responsibility. We've placed an enormous lot of responsibility on government which should not be theirs, which should be community, and we've done it in the families as well. We should go back to birthing order. The firstborn is the one that needs to have a voice. The father and the mother, when they are still alive in this family, it depends who died. They are the ones that we need to listen to and to respect their view. Because pride is what's killing our society and what's making us, what's responsible for more deaths than COVID deaths, is relational deaths, where people don't want to speak with each other. And it's terrible to think that somebody dies and then a family scatters out of each other, and they hurt each other because they can't agree on how it should be done, what should be done, and who should pay for it. We need to go back to respect. We must respect the elders, the mother and the father. That's the 5th commandment. And if the father says it will be cremation and you will pay, or we all should pull in, then we respect him and we humbly do what he says. And that's just my take on it.
Blanche, can I just quickly add something there that I've personally practiced? And it's to remove my ego. Because there's people who I know well, who I don't necessarily, or who I lost touch with, or they made me angry about something, but then I hear they're sick, or somebody they love is sick. Now the ego says, they didn't send you a message when you were sick, why should you send them? And that's ego talking. What compassion and love does is you reach out. Ego is also prideful, is also respecting hierarchies. I'm a middle-born and I'm a bit of the person he's describing. I kind of sometimes jump the hierarchy in the family, but also sometimes letting my brother or my oldest sister make certain decisions, even sometimes I don't necessarily agree. And sometimes just saying to yourself, Monica, keep quiet. This moment requires us to be united. And Dr. van der Berg has been talking a lot about unity. And sometimes it means just stepping back, even if you don't necessarily agree.
And if I just add to also remember, apart from ego, family, God did not give us a spirit of fear. Power, love, and sound mind. So we use this thing, you know. And remember, our children are sponges. They will soak up everything. They soak up our emotions. They soak up the aura around us. So we need to remember to have quality of life. Have quality moments. Remember that we don't know if we are going to be here next week or next year now with this. So this is more real. To live every single day as if it could possibly be your last. And remember to reach out. And don't feel guilty if you didn't answer the phone when somebody called to give you a death message, because it's impossible for everybody to be available for everybody all the time. So there's no need to feel guilty. It's okay to say no and have quality time with friends and family.
This question is to Mrs. Kanji and to Dr. Njaba. It's about couples experiencing difficulties, which includes domestic violence. They are asking for advice for those who are in violent relationships and are confined to the same location, I guess, because of the restrictions. Dr. Njaba.
This has been happening when we were in the first lockdown. We have not really seen somebody coming to the hospital seeking help, but we have seen it on social media. Now you want to know the audacity of that social media, whether it's correct, but we tend to believe that is true, because what is happening is that when couples live together, is that one goes to work, one goes to another place of her work, and they only meet at home at very late, and they do not have time to quarrel or to know each other or to argue on life happenings. But now with the lockdown where they are forced to stay together, it also through that they become frustrated, somebody becomes frustrated, and the person perhaps is also seen that their routine, some of them used to go and meet friends, drink together, and now the person is like told to stay home, then it's become very difficult. I was just thinking when the announcement was done yesterday that even now on Friday, weekend, Saturday, Sunday, there will be no sitting or alcohol. It means that now it is almost the same thing when we started having our first lockdown, that the family will be together, the husband and the wife will be together. And as much as we say that we know each other, it seems that couples do not really know each other. They now tend to know each other when they are seeing each other every day. And at least when they are out either to work or to whoever's doing their daily activity, that really saves them not to come together to argue or to discuss things. That's why now you see those domestic violence is becoming a problem. But nevertheless, not only that, people are also living with fear and anxiety and depression. So as a result, the way they express themselves, it is out of that anger, out of frustration, self-blame and blaming others, and they now really become a circle and become a problem at home. So what we need to do is to make sure that we have a psychosocial response team, where now each and every person, whether it's a husband or the wife whom they find themselves having a problem, that they can contact us so that we send, we communicate, because there is a telephone number. Unfortunately, it's only that I did not come with the number. We have got telephone number where one can reach out, and then this person can be directed where the person can go before the violence become really a violence where people will hurt each other and causing those distress in front of the children, because it will also shape up the future of the kids, because the kids will witness what the parents are doing and those violences that are happening. So it is extending that people should really reach out for assistance.
Your input, Mrs. Kanchi?
Yeah, thank you. Just to add on Dr. Jamba, that we also need to know that although we are in the same house, we are individuals. Yeah, we need to allow each other also to be individuals in the house. Although people are couple, we are a couple in the house. We need to be able to also find opportunity in this time, so that also we know we are, as Dr. Jamba has said, people were used to the type of social life that one was going out the whole day, maybe the husband or the man, and people didn't have time for each other. So you could face that. You had your own alone time, but now you are sitting in the house with the children. The children are not going to school. And also, what are the responsibilities that we are all having in the house? Because sometimes it's also that is a cause of frustration or irritation by one partner, because the one partner might be there, the one partner might be overloaded, and that one who's overloaded is being irritated. So we also need to find that as an opportunity to see, are there courses online, are there positive things that we can also do as an individual, and or allow ourselves also each other that space. Because if you also constantly demand maybe that attention, it also can be a cause of irritation. So we need to also be individual, although we are a couple, but also to be able to use it as an opportunity to also, as the colleague have said, that you need to also have your schedule of the day as a couple and also as an individual, and be able to know what is my program of the day, maybe your exercise, your reading, your budgeting of your news, because what you are reading is so important, whether it's on social media, whether it's on WhatsApp, because that can also put a lot of pressure and a lot of anxiety, because you are just a human being. What you are consuming is also what you are bringing out. So you will be also irritated. So we need to also look, how do we budget this news consumption, and how do we also reconnect with others? Because although they are a couple in the house, you have friends, you have family members that you can also reach out to.
We are slowly coming to an end of of the question session. There are questions for Pastors September and Van den Berg. Churches have been closed and the community is isolated. This question is, do you believe that COVID-19 is a punishment or punishment for Namibia's sin? Reverend?
It's a difficult question because I don't know what is Namibia's sin. But on a serious note, there is sin almost in everything, in every brokenness. But that sin comes from the original sin. And that sin was not caused by God. That sin was caused by us, human beings, who were entrusted with taking care of God's creation. Now, the God that we get to learn through the Word of God and through His revelation is a God of love. He's a God who cares. He's a God who's always present with us. He's a God that doesn't take delight in us when we go through difficult times. So that God doesn't just stand ready every day to punish us for whatever. I think it's a time for us to understand that as human beings created by God, we have a responsibility to do God's will. We have an opportunity to put our faith in God to emerge out of whatever crisis we find ourselves in. But James also reminds us that faith without action is dead, which means it also imposes a responsibility on us to always do the right thing and act responsible. No, it's not God punishing us.
Pastor Van den Berg?
I'm going to say it a little bit harsher. It's absolute nonsense. Because, so did we not sin in 2019 and in 2018? Because COVID came in 2020, right? So people always want to have understand what happens in this world through schemes, and God doesn't work with schemes. God's truth plays out over long centuries. People have said drought is a way of God speaking to us. I firmly believe God speaks to me every day that I see the sunrise. Why does God always have to speak through bad stuff? Bad stuff will always happen. We live in a fallen world. COVID, if you are clever and you read the signs, it's a normal thing that happened. It's not a punishment. So we must stop preaching that kind of condemnation and fear, because it's doing us harm. We need to speak. A child of God, always when he speaks, the focus is hope, love, and unity. And if those three things aren't there, don't listen to it. It's nonsense. I promise you it's nonsense. Because Jesus never spoke fear, division, or condemnation. That's why he died. He took all those things on us. So yes, we all sin. And then COVID should have been there after Cain and Abel. It should have been there all along. Drought should have been there all along. If bad stuff is a punishment for sin, we have to be punished through our whole lives. And we had good years with rain, and we had good years without pandemics, and it was not that we did not sin. It's just how it is.
And I think the second last question requires the input of almost everyone, but I will start with Mrs. Sinkala. That's now, this person is worried about the long-term effects of about social cohesiveness, church attendance. Reverend and Pastor Van den Berg can chip in, and just social connections. Will we ever be the same?
No, we'll never be the same again. You know, you're not the same today as you were yesterday, so we won't be the same. Every day we change. It's just what we choose to do with the change and how we choose to direct ourselves. I think the First Lady mentioned earlier that we should have had a lot of psychiatrists, psychologists, all of these, because we are a nation that comes from a lot of trauma and a lot of hurt. I mean, the pastor mentioned earlier also about families and how we need to respect each other and listen to each other, know who's the head. The problem is our foundations. Even the couple who, now that they are together and locked in the same house, experience cabin fever. Why? Because the foundations were not right. We need to fix the foundations, and we need to realize that even if we have not started off on the right foot, there's a lot that we can do to fix the broken walls and the, all of these things. So what we need to realize is, people sometimes say, oh, time heals all wounds. No, it doesn't heal all wounds. You need to do. Grief even is action, yeah? You need to do the grief work. You need to allow yourself to feel the feelings. You need to take care of yourself. You need to cry. You need to give voice and utterance to the anger and the worry and the concern, and you need to pray, and you need to ask the questions. Then you need to make choices of how you are going to live every single day. So this nation is never going to be the same again. We have learned a lot about our infrastructure. We've learned a lot about, what doctors to place where and what kind of psychosocial services we need. And so we are going to do the work to get there. And we've all learned that we are not all immune to this or that. COVID, grief, death does not see color. It doesn't see age anymore. So we know we need to unite. So we won't be the same. If we choose, we can be wiser and we can be better.
If we choose.
Yeah.
Yes, the church is one, but the church is not the same, has never been. And so we sometimes worship differently. We have different hours, we have different duration, we have different kinds of interventions within the church, hopefully to achieve the same objective. The church will not be the same. The church is already not be the same. It's a good thing that the church rids itself from this idea that it's an institution, that it's a structure, and that the church returns to being a movement that continuously is renewed as God reveals himself and his purpose in this world, that the church continuously is on the move. And that is, I think, what we would understand. Yes, we would be different. We would, some will perhaps continue to create community in a virtual way. They will have to assess what the impact of that will be. Others are constrained by other factors. They would, as quickly as possible, want to meet physically, but all of that would change. I think what's important for us is the foundation. That is what I think even now we should begin to put in place, a good value system that runs throughout us as human beings. That is, I think, what we require. That will also help us to deal with any kind of challenge that we may face in the future.
Maybe ask the question again.
No, the question is just the person worried about the long-term social concerns regarding the social cohesiveness, and also asking whether the church and just general social connections will ever be the same. Your fellow panelists say that they will not be the same, so your view.
I fully agree with them that nothing will not just the church will ever be the same. But I'm so glad about that, because the church was so hypocritical before COVID. I mean, it's a wonderful thing that happened. It just exposed us, because we were always in conflict about our spiritualities and baptism and who's right and who's wrong and who's good. I mean, we were busy with the wrong things and thinking that we need to send people to heaven. Heaven is the new earth. That's where it will be. We're going to be shocked when we wake up with God and we are back here in just a restored life. We are here for a purpose, and we have lost that. Not just now, we've lost it long time ago. And I'm glad that has happened, because the church buildings has also become holy cows. I mean, just think about it. A building that just takes 1 hour a week, people in, to kind of have community. We can have community in many other ways, and we don't have to have a building. We need to strip all our buildings and build something new there for the community. Community centers, and help people, psychological wards. And that's what we are supposed. We were called for a purpose, and that's to restore brokenness. Our world is broken, and we must live with our feet on this planet and make not just a difference, but make the world different each day. That's the meaning of success. That's the meaning of Christianity for me. That's what Jesus came to show us. And we have institutionalized it, and we've started to count the butts and the buildings and the budgets, buildings, and people. You know how many? Apart from, but what is our effect in the world? And I, in that sense, think it's good what COVID has exposed the church to, and now I think it's time that we can start anew, as she said, and take hands now and have a mission, because we were called for a mission because our God was on a mission, and we've lost that. So yes, I pray to God that it will never go back to as it was.
Okay, Mrs. Kanji and Dr. Njaba, when it comes to COVID-19, there is so much information that I don't know who or what to believe anymore. Where can I go to get the most up-to-date information regarding the virus?
I may start.
Yes.
The information is true that there are so many things that are happening. So many things that are happening either in the social media, or either a community member is calling you or a family member is calling you. I remember when COVID started, I had a morning meeting with the student and the intern and the doctors, and we were now talking about what are we ready now if COVID come and affect one of our patients, especially when we are dealing with mentally ill persons, who perhaps they will not be able to follow what we are saying: wash hand, sanitize, wear the mask, keep the distance, stay at home because of their condition. I remember very well, one of the interns said, no, you are telling us to isolate, you are telling us to wash hand, you are telling us to wear mask, but there are people in the community who tested COVID positive and they are roaming about. So then I said, do you know one? Then he said, yes, I know one. Are you sure? Then I said, sure. Then I said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to inform the Minister of Health. I'm going to inform the ED of Health that there is a certain person who tested positive for COVID and is roaming about. So what I did call them, and we were given manpower to go and look for that person, and that person was really taken to go and show that person, and they went around. So then when they went around, that person was already in self-isolation, and I was even informed that it was case number 5. So then these are the rumors people are spreading. People are talking about the vaccine. People are talking, I even heard these medias, there is one person, like the pastors here, saying now we have so many doctors, we have so many nurses, they are spreading this. And that person, when you listen to this person explaining why is that now they are saying that the president need to go, the advice from the doctor, why didn't they allow us also to get our advice from our doctor to know which type of vaccine should we get? So what is important is that when you go to the vaccination center, depending on what is available there, the vaccination that is available there, there are trained staff to explain to you. Regardless of your age, regardless of your comorbidities, illness that you have before, they will explain everything. Then it will now be your choice to choose which of the type of vaccine that you would want to have injected. So with all those things, the information, we have got people in the Ministry of Health and Social Services who have got the right information to give to the public. if there is somebody out there who really need to know what is happening, especially with the vaccine, especially with the virus, and we are told we have the first wave, the second wave, now we are battling with the third wave, and the information pamphlet, the problem we have in Namibia is that we do not want to read. If you read the information on the pamphlets which are either published by the Ministry of Health and Social Services or by the World Health Organization, you will be able to get the correct information so that you be able to identify the false information that the public is being spreading and the genuine information that you need to know about the virus. So I think the places for those informations are there and can be obtained.
FLON, I'm handing it back to you with this last question by your viewer. How do you keep yourself mentally healthy during the pandemic? I know you shared about your experience with COVID, but now this person wants to know the after.
So it's again that question of making sure I can control what's in my power. It is in my power to find credible sources on information. Something that I'm not sure about, I'll ask somebody. I speak to my pastor a lot. I remain connected. I exercise a lot. And when I'm feeling as if things are out of control, I try and find somebody who I feel has that in control. I've got some complex financial issues at the moment. I speak to people who understand that. If I've got complex emotional issues, I speak to my pastor. So I don't do what Furi is saying. I don't go to social media to find out what social media would do in my situation. I speak to people who I know, who I trust, and who I know understand that issue. If I've got a lung issue, I'll go to a pulmonologist. If I've got a heart issue, I go to a cardiologist. If I've got a brain issue, I go to a neurologist. If I've got a spiritual issue, I'll go to my church leader or whichever pastor I feel most comfortable in. If it's a psychiatric issue, I go to Dr. Jabba. If it's a social work issue, I'll go to Mrs. Kanji. Psychological issue, here she is. So I believe experts. I take guidance. And I also empower myself with the right information. And another strange coping mechanism for me is really to spend more time with people. If it's one thing I've neglected in the last 10 years of my life from being busy, is just picking up a phone call and saying, Furi, how are you? So lots of people have received random phone calls and messages from me, and they're probably wondering what's going on with Monica. I'm not having a midlife crisis. I'm just reaching out to people who I feel I've neglected. So that's how I cope.
If I can add, that is very amazing, because that is what I was trying to say earlier about remembering to live, the quality of life, connection, because death is very good at reminding us that we are alive.
Yeah?
Yeah, I just want to add to that. It's very important what you have said, the First Lady, that you go to the authentic information. To people that you know, you will get that authentic information. I always wonder when we are so adapting the vaccines that is there to wipe the nation off. And I'm asking myself, most of the women went through family planning, injection, or pills. We went through this malaria treatment, TB treatment, the ARV treatment. Now you wonder, why did you not adapt that? What is so different? So it's so important to go to those authentic information. And it's so cruel for people who are just forwarding anything that they see on social media. Because you also don't know in what situation is that person that you are forwarding that message to. You need to be able to think yourself that, what is the purpose of me forwarding this message? What will I reach through that? Before you forward it. And if that person comes with different questions, will you be able to answer that, all those questions? So people who are forwarding the message, we need to find ourselves in a position of like, maybe we are the one also causing more other deaths, because we are making the people so anxious about it.
I agree. And I think we've got about 5 minutes left, and I think I just want to give you each a 1-minute opportunity to say what you really feel right now and how you could soothe people who feel as if their lives have been ripped apart.
No, for me, I think just it's an opportunity for us as family again, because we are constrained in our movement, to be together, to create a sense of unity again, to love, to care, to show respect. We need not be dogmatic about it. It is just a wonderful opportunity that we have. And that connectedness help us through difficult times.
Thank you.
I think what I would say is let's use this as an opportunity to grow. I would suggest get a journal. Everybody, get a journal. Make notes, express your feelings. You'd be amazed how I keep journals from 10 years ago. I can go look at it. I've got prayer journal. And it is really amazing to see how prayers have been answered. Have memory books for your loved ones that you've lost. It really helps you with the healing and all of that. And just appreciate love. And if we choose, we will be fine.
There is so much help out there, and people don't use it. People suffer in silence, and I think that's also a prideful gesture. Reach out, ask, and you will find out how much help there is available. First. Secondly, is the help that is available there, I think we must just coordinate it and connect it and become a stronger force. And not everybody is doing his own thing. But we can do a much bigger thing if we can do it together.
Yes, hope is what is we need to, and we need to prepare. We make sure that we prepare our children, that one of the good day, one have to die. I know people don't like talking about death, but we need to make sure that we prepare and we informed, because it's very important, because they will remember my father told me this, or my mother said that if she died, this is what's supposed to be done. Because then they will live with hope to say, you have prepared. It's not a shock to them. You have prepared, and we know that one of the good day we're going to pass on, although we do not know which day.
Thank you. Yes, I just want to emphasize the whole thing of social reconnection. That is so important. The virus doesn't travel through our phones. We need to be able to reconnect. We need to throw away our pride and the blame game, and try to strengthen that reconnection. Go back to our cultures where we used to care for each other. And I think that virus have also, the pandemic have presented with an opportunity to reassess our structures, our way of living. Let us maybe try to be more proactive and not reactive, so that at least whatever pandemics face in future, our system will be able to respond better.
All right, then, Madam First Lady, I see you have guests here, so you can introduce them as they take it away and take us to the closure of the program.
I think it's been calming for me just to have this panel around me and what they're saying, and we thought it's important to really have an outro that is calming, and that's why we've brought in some excellent musicians who are just going to sing a beautiful rendition for us as the final of this program.